Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I do appreciate you being with me. Listen, let me ask you to do me a favor. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. All right? We're up well over 8,000 subscribers. We continue to grow. We want to keep on growing. All right? And so do that. Not going to cost you a dime. If you wish to give, that's great. That's wonderful. And it's needed, but nonetheless. Oh, pardon me. And so I just appreciate you being with me. All right. And I appreciate the wonderful comments that I received, supportive comments, appreciation for what I'm trying to share here insofar as how God has kept his word. We're just hearing from more and more and more people all of the time. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful to see the growth of covenant eschatology. Okay, now, yesterday I shared with you some initial thoughts about the four species of Succot. Succot is known as the Feast of Harvest. It was the very last, except Shemini Atzerot, the very last of Israel's feast days, and it represented the harvest. And I shared with you some thoughts about the Etrog and the Lulav. Now, that has to do with the willow, the myrtle, the palm. There were four species, as they called them. They had a citrus fruit. It was very often grapefruit or lemon, especially, but it had to be part of the process. And by the way, what they would do is on the Feast of Sukkot, every single day, they walked around, as many people as possible there in, the altar. They walked around that altar and they sang, "Save, Lord, save us now." All the while shaking their lulav and their etrog toward the altar and raising them to the heavens and praying, "Save, Lord, save us now." Now, just think about that in John chapter 7. Here are Israelites. John chapter 7 is on the last day of Sukkot. And on the seventh day, guess what they did? They didn't walk around the altar once. They walked around it 7 times, recalling entrance into the promised land in the book of Joshua, the conquering of Jericho, and the victory of God. This is all symbolism, incredible symbolism. Well, the reason that they sang, "Save, Lord, save us now," is that even in the time of Jesus, and N.T. Wright points this out, even in the time of Jesus, even though in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, the children of Israel had been allowed to return to their land, they knew that the messianic prophecies had not been fulfilled. The glory of the kingdom had not been restored. They believed that they were still in some way, shape, form, or fashion in, quote, captivity, unquote. Because, once again, Messiah had not come. Now, did they have a wrong concept of the kingdom? Of course they did. That's easily demonstrated in the New Testament. But all of that aside, is the bottom line reality that they believed that they were still in captivity. That makes it ironic, by the way, when Jesus in John chapter 8 said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:32. And the Jews just puffed up. They said, "What are you talking about? Make us free. We're the children of Abraham. We've never been in bondage to anybody." Never been in bondage to anybody. Huh. What about those Egyptians? What about those Assyrians? What about those Babylonians? and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans. I mean, such arrogance for them to just puff up and say, we've never been in bondage to any man. And yet, in the rabbinic writings, they express they're waiting for their freedom. They're waiting for the second Exodus to lead them to the promised land of liberty and freedom under Messiah. You see, that's all polemic rhetoric, is all that is. Okay, so we had this beautiful, beautiful ceremony, and they're crying out, "Save, Lord, save us now." And this is the time of the harvest, at which they're giving thanks and praise to God for the ingathering, for the blessings from Yahweh. But they're looking for some other kind of blessing. And on page 39 of my book, I share from scholarship what they were sort of kind of looking for. J.A. Draper, and I'm reading from page 39 of my book, calls our attention to the eschatological significance of the lulav and the etrog that we discussed yesterday, both of which were waved during the Feast of Tabernacles. Quote, "The lulav appears also to have early become a symbol of eschatological hope and resurrection, since it is a frequent symbol on Jewish tombs." So what are they doing? They're going back to archaeology, and they're looking at inscriptions on tombs. And they're investigating, why is it that on those tombs you have these kind of inscriptions, artful descriptions of the lulav and the etrog? It's because of the hope of the resurrection. Okay. And those inscriptions were both with or without an accompanying etrog or menorah. They didn't always include the etrog or the menorah, but they did the lulav. The Feast of Tabernacles follows just 5 days after the great day of purification for Israel, the Day of Atonement, so that Tabernacles was celebrated in purity. Likewise, Hillier shows that the shaking of the lulav had within it the concept or symbol of resurrection. With these associations between the lulav and the etrog with resurrection, please pay careful attention, it is easy to see how important the Feast of Tabernacles is to an understanding of eschatology. And that leads us to a discussion of the doctrine of the harvest as the resurrection. And that's why all of that entire matrix of ideas, thoughts, and concepts is part of what was included in the lulav and the etrog, because it's all part of the, quote, harvest symbolism representing coming resurrection. Now, let me make this observation. In my recent debate with Dr. Richard Carrier, he began his first presentation by telling us, very first point, Jesus held and agreed with the common Jewish concepts of eschatology of the day, which meant, according to Dr. Carrier, Jesus believed in physical resurrection. Jesus believed that his coming at the end of the age was going to be the end of time, and he was going to come out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man. Ladies and gentlemen, let me suggest to you that you go to YouTube and that you watch my first presentation. Now watch his, but watch my first presentation, because I had anticipated what Dr. Carrier was going to say, and I had a chart, and a good part of my presentation was a complete and total dismantling and refutation and destruction of his argument. The point being, yes, the Jews had some wrong ideas about the nature of the kingdom, and they had some wrong ideas about the nature of the end of the age. And they had some wrong ideas of the nature of resurrection. Matter of fact, we can document about 5 or 6 different views of the end of the age, resurrection, life after death, etc., that were held among the ancient Jews. Therefore, it's absolutely wrong when people like Dr. Carrier said, well, all of the Jews believed in this. That's misguided. That's to be ill-informed, to be honest about it. And for somebody of his erudition to say, well, this is what all the Jews believed, it's just simply false. Chris Date, in my debate with him, said the same thing. That is an ill-informed and wrong position. So, got to hurry here. What we're dealing with here is harvest and resurrection. I do not know of a more powerful text, maybe even a more important text to deal with the subject of resurrection and harvest than Matthew chapter 13. Now, before I get there, I want to go back to Matthew chapter 3. Now, I've written a book entitled Elijah Has Already Come. In that book, I make the following statement. Other than Jesus and Paul, John the Baptizer is the most important, most significant eschatological figure in the entirety of the New Testament. Why do I say that? I say that because he was Elijah, according to Jesus, Matthew chapter 17, 10, and 11. Because he was the voice of the messenger, in Malachi chapter 3, 1 to 3. And he was the voice of one crying in the wilderness, saying, prepare you in the desert a highway for our God. John was to herald and proclaim the imminent coming of the day of the Lord, of the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. So here is John in Matthew chapter 3, as Elijah, as the voice, as the messenger. What was John's message? He said to the Pharisees and Sadducees who were coming out to him, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath that is about to come? You ought to read Dale Ellison Jr.'s comments on the Greek of the text and how John was expecting imminent judgment. Read Donald Hagner in the Word Biblical Commentary on the meaning of about to come in the text. Just read the commentaries in which they assert and affirm and demonstrate that John was preaching imminent judgment. Well, wait a minute. Imminent judgment what? At the day of the Lord, the great and terrible day of the Lord. But wait a minute. What is the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord? It's the harvest. It's the feast of harvest fulfilled. And there's something very, very remarkable. John said, the axe is already at the root, indicating imminent judgment. And he said, the winnowing fork is already in his hand. Here's something you need to know. This is critical. The winnowing fork was not an instrument that began the harvest. It was used at the end of the harvest. Because the winnowing fork is the instrument that they used. They would take the raw wheat, toss it up in the air to separate the wheat from the chaff, the wheat from the stalks. It was the end of the harvest instrument. So by John using this imagery of Jesus already holding the winnowing fork, he was essentially saying, it's not long till the harvest. The end of the harvest, which is Succot. And Jesus himself said in John chapter 4, verse 35, as he spoke to his apostles, do not think to say within yourselves, there are yet 4 months and then the harvest. And the imagery here is from Pentecost until harvest. The 4-month period of time from Pentecost to Succot. Do not think to say within yourselves, there are yet 4 months and then the harvest. For I say unto you, lift up your eyes, for the fields are white already unto harvest. One more time, the imagery of the imminent harvest is being stated, first by John, now by Jesus. So tomorrow, we're going to dive into Matthew chapter 13 and Jesus' greatest parable on Succot, i.e., harvest. I'll see you there.